The fight begins with a group of adventurers facing a giant dragon. The leader, Kun, shouts for Biza, an A-rank shaman, to use his support magic. He also tells Rotish, an A-rank mage, to continue with the fire attacks. Finally, Kunan orders Saki, an S-rank swordswoman, to find an opening and finish the attack. Then, he turns to our protagonist, Yuki, and tells him to stay out of the way. We can see then that our boy is just an F-level baggage handler. Yuki confirms that she will stay behind so as not to interfere with the fight. With that, Biza and Rotish combine their spells to distract the creature. The strategy works, and Kunan yells for Saki to attack at that moment. The girl steps forward, sword in hand, ready to defeat the dragon. Her eyes fill with power as she focuses her energy on the blade. Next, she unleashes her most powerful ability, the luminous slash. The powerful attack hits the dragon squarely, and it screams in pain. And with a single blow, the enormous creature falls to the ground, lifeless. Our protagonist observes the scene from a distance, completely shocked. He is incredibly impressed by how easily a rank S defeated a dragon. History explains that decades have passed since dungeons first appeared in the world, and with them came the adventurers who exploit them to make a living. The problem is that many of them only hunt for money and don't actually clean the dungeons. Suddenly, a hand grabs our protagonist's shoulder, startling him. It was Biza, shouting at our boy, calling him Dorman, and demanding a potion. Yuki quickly apologizes and takes the item from her backpack to hand it over. Rotish then appears and mocks our protagonist for not fighting. The two begin to whisper, complaining about how a weakling like him showed up. They say Yuki is a useless rookie with no mana, and moreover is super slow. The leader, Kun, gets angry and orders the two to shut up immediately. He reminds everyone that this is an S-ranked dungeon and no place for games. The two apologize and Kunan turns to reprimand Yuki. He says that if our hero is part of the team, he better do his job right. Our boy simply nods his head, without much to say in that situation. The scene then cuts, showing an ancient city or some kind of fortress. We see our protagonist reflecting on what has just happened. He admits to himself that he didn't have the mindset of a true adventurer. It was his fault for getting too carried away when observing the power of an S rank. But the truth is that their levels are completely different, since he doesn't even have a class. Even so, he promises that one day he will be like them, and Saki appears to talk to him. She warns him not to get distracted during the exploration and to be more careful. The girl says she doesn't want to lose anyone else in her family, and Yuki understands. Our protagonist thinks that he doesn't want to go through that feeling again either. Next, the story goes back 2 years into the past, showing a younger Yuki. The news on TV showed the tragedy that happened at the orphanage where they lived. In the flashback, Yuki and Saki watch everything unfold, completely devastated by the disaster. He then remembers that the two grew up together in that place like brothers, and since they dreamed of being adventurers, they set off to fulfill that dream. But the home to which they might one day return simply no longer existed, just like all the dear people who lived in and cared for the orphanage. An escape from the dungeon destroyed everything and took the lives of everyone they knew. Back in the present, our hero vows to prevent this from happening again. Suddenly, a small, one-eyed monster appears near our boy, and a mysterious figure watches from a distance, saying, "I found you." Our protagonist senses a strange presence and immediately goes on high alert. He notices something approaching, but he can't see exactly what it is. The small creature is then struck by an attack coming from somewhere. Unexpectedly, a red magic circle appears beneath the entire group. Kunan senses the danger and shouts that it's a teleportation trap. A mysterious voice tells everyone to welcome that human. In the blink of an eye, everyone is teleported to a different place. Biza and Rotish are confused, unsure if they are in the boss's office. Kunan takes command and tells everyone to form a circle and stay alert. Saki then senses a presence approaching and prepares for combat. From the ground, a pool of red liquid begins to bubble intensely. Kunan clicks his tongue, already realizing that the enemy was extremely powerful. From inside the pool, a foot emerges, slow and imposing. and from him emerges a man whom the party leader recognizes as the Demon King. Our protagonist is completely paralyzed with fear by his presence. It turns out that this title is only given to the bosses of Rank S dungeons. Without a second thought, Saki charges at full speed toward the new enemy. At the same time, Kunan uses the Ice Spear spell to support her. He is so strong that he can cast the spell 3 times at the same time. The spears then fly towards the Demon King, who merely watches. Saki also attacks using her Luminous Slash ability once more. A large cloud of dust rises from the impact of the blows, and a voice emerges from it. The Demon King emerges completely unscathed and complains about the young man's lack of manners. The ice spears shatter without leaving a single scratch on him. He then says that they are ignorant, and several monsters appear beside him. In an instant, one of the monsters advances and delivers a powerful blow to Kunan. An elf from the enemy group laughs at the situation with a rather mocking look. She comments that it seems an undocumented immigrant ended up coming along with their group. Meanwhile, a beast man attacks Biza with a violent kick. The shaman is unable to react in time and is thrown far away by the powerful attack. Rodish is also attacked from behind by a vampire-like monster. The vampire then mocks him, saying that this is no time for jokes. Suddenly, a new magic circle appears on the ground, enveloped in dark energy. The Demon King prepares to unleash his full power and crush them all. Kunan realizes that if they continue like this, they will all be easily defeated. He wonders if he will be able to create an opening amidst all this chaos. Our boy also understands that defeat is certain if nothing is done now, but he refuses to let tragedy strike him again and gets up. He then decides that as an adventurer, he needs to do something to help. Yuki pulls out a strange lighter that was stored in her backpack. When he lights the lighter, a very bright golden light shines intensely. Clock gears appear out of nowhere, indicating that something is about to happen. A voice announces that the return sequence has been activated, startling everyone. Next, a 5-second countdown begins to appear on the screen. Our hero then steps forward and faces the Demon King without any fear, but suddenly, a sword pierces our protagonist's chest. Even so, he says that the villain's opponent now is himself, not the group. The Demon King is surprised and somewhat intrigued by the boy's attitude. Biza and Rotish yell for him to come back, because he will be out of range of the return. Saki also shouts Yuki's name, desperate about the dangerous situation. Kunan seems to understand the plan and pushes Saki with all his might. The countdown continues, and now there are only 3 seconds left. He then throws the girl away towards the other adventurers. Our protagonist is confused and asks what Kunan is doing. Yuki looks back and sees that the group is moving away to a safe place. The leader has a serious expression while Saki watches him, shocked. The beast man celebrates, thinking he has succeeded in thwarting our hero's plan. He then seizes the opportunity to deliver a powerful punch to our boy. Yuki falls to the ground, and the vampire asks what her real plan is. Meanwhile, the countdown is down to just 2 seconds. Even wounded, our protagonist firmly holds the magic lighter in his hands. He then reaches out, trying to pick up some object that has fallen on the floor. With only 1 second left, the monsters watch the scene, curious. Saki cries desperately upon seeing a bright light coming from an object. Even the Demon King and his servants seem interested in what is about to happen. Our hero smiles and says he will find a way to defeat the villain. Suddenly, Kunan's hand grabs the object that Yuki was trying to reach. The leader then praises our boy, saying it was a brilliant decision. And finally, the countdown comes to an end and reaches 0. A very bright golden light explodes, covering the entire area. The golden light envelopes the entire group of adventurers and teleports them away. Our protagonist observes the scene with a look of satisfaction. Then he takes a deep breath and prepares for what is to come. From afar, Saki shouts Yuki's name with all the strength she has left. The girl tries to reach it, but the light drags her away against her will. The dust settles, and we see that our hero is left alone with his enemies. The Demon King then asks if that was his way of defeating him. Yuki confirms, saying that the others are high-level adventurers, and if they manage to return alive, They will surely one day clean the dungeon. He only feels bad about having to leave Saki alone again. The villain lets out a laugh and praises the boy's courage for sacrificing himself. He says that this madness of risking oneself for others is magnificent. The Demon King then approaches and calls our protagonist human. Then he surprises him by proposing that the two of them make a deal. Our hero is completely confused and asks what kind of agreement this would be. The villain bares his fangs and confirms that he has a proposition for him. The agreement is that Yuki will join them to explore other dungeons. Our boy is shocked and asks why monsters would do that. The Demon King explains that they are in crisis because of humans. Our hero then realizes that there is another side to this story. The Demon King explains that they only attack because humans invade their home. He goes so far as to say that, in reality, the monsters are the victims and the sacrifices. And as an example, he mentions the dragon that our hero's group defeated. Yuki then reflects that the rank S dungeon was dangerous from the start. The villain reveals that, in order to protect themselves, they need to strengthen their own dungeon, and he will not allow tragedies to happen to his subordinates again. Our boy is surprised to hear the word tragedy coming from a monster. He then realizes that the Demon King is just like him and only wants to protect his own. Even so, Yuki asks if he's really going to sacrifice other dungeons for this. The villain confirms that, if it's for the good of his subordinates, he will do whatever it takes. Our hero remembers Saki and understands that he would do the same for his family. He then asks if the Demon King can swear not to harm humans. The villain replies that if they become strong enough, the humans will stop attacking. Yuki then decides that she can trust him, since he is her only option. The Demon King warns that if they don't trust each other, they will all perish in the end. Our protagonist thinks that one day his old party might return there, but until then, the sacrifices and tragedies will continue to happen. The possibility of his orphanage being attacked again fills him with panic. Devastated by the situation, he falls to his knees, not knowing what to do. Finally, our hero accepts the deal and says he will cooperate with the villain. The Demon King and our hero shake hands to seal the agreement between them. But Yuki shouts that she's not doing this for the monsters, but for the humans. The villain smiles, satisfied, and says he is happy with our boy's decision. He then declares that, from that day forward, Yuki is their new collaborator. Our protagonist is still in doubt, saying that he doesn't even have a group of friends. The Demon King replies that this is the most important part of all. He squeezes the boy's hand even tighter to emphasize his next words. Because the monster tamer class can only be chosen by someone who doesn't have any other class. The monsters then say that they will use our hero, who was incompetent and weak. But Yuki faces them and says that, in the end, he will be the one to tame them all. The Demon King ignores him and continues explaining the plan to our boy. He reveals that to go to other dungeons, they need to be summoned by someone. And the first condition for becoming a tamer is not having a defined class. The second condition is that a contract with a monster is mandatory. There are 3 ways to make the contract: fighting, understanding, or connecting. Our hero then asks, curiously, what the third way to do this would be. The villain smiles maliciously and says that the third way is through force. Suddenly, a dark energy bursts from his hand and enters our protagonist. Yuki screams in pain as the energy forms a sort of gem-like mark on her hand. Our hero is completely shocked, not understanding what is happening. The Demon King explains that he can now also see everything that our hero sees. Yuki understands that all her actions will be observed to prevent betrayal. The mark on his hand glows, and he realizes he can't ask anyone for help. With that, he decides he'll have to deal with everything alone, and the Demon King snaps his fingers. The villain then says that the preparations for the clearing are complete. He then announces that he is sending our boy back to the surface. He tells Yuki to enter any dungeon and call him at the right time. Our protagonist is confused and doesn't understand what this right moment is. Suddenly, he is teleported to the dungeon exit and reunites with his old group. Saki looks at him with teary eyes, unable to believe that he is all right. Our boy then waves to her with a somewhat awkward smile. The girl runs and jumps into his arms, giving him a tight hug. She cries with relief upon seeing that her childhood friend is alive and safe. The rest of the group watches the scene from a distance, moved by the reunion. The story then cuts to the next day, showing a very modern building. We see that our hero went to an information center for adventurers. The receptionist is surprised and asks if he's gonna clean a dungeon by himself. He thinks he's already in trouble, but she says walking alone is suspicious these days. She explains that, lately, cleaning dungeons is no longer the main objective. Many adventurers hunt only for money, and this causes more disasters. Our protagonist understands that the guild will not openly admit the problem. To prevent this, there are now very strict security restrictions. The receptionist then shows a graph to better explain the situation. She says that the ranking only increases by completing dungeons and contributing to the guild. And if he acts alone, this contribution cannot be confirmed. Our hero feels a little embarrassed because he can't tell her the truth. The woman continues, saying that those who travel alone are usually desperate for money and that these people typically dream of achieving success. Yuki then says that it's not about the money, but about leveling up. The receptionist understands and begins searching for a dungeon for him in the system. She finds the rank F dungeon, Labyrinth of Silence, for our boy. The place is for beginners, and there are few reports of monsters there. A guard then opens the gate so that our protagonist can enter. He wishes him good luck and asks our hero to proceed with clearing the area. Yuki finds the security a bit weak and sees only one emergency button. Suddenly, he hears the Demon King's voice in his head and becomes frightened. He asks if that's a skill, and the villain immediately confirms it. Our boy gets angry because he didn't know he could communicate with monsters. He wonders if it's a permanent ability, but finds it all very strange. The Demon King explains that an abandoned dungeon receives no maintenance. The Demon King explains that rich dungeons attract adventurers seeking money, but the abandoned are left behind, and the monsters breed in peace. This causes the dungeon to collapse, and our hero thought that was the case. But he realizes there are no monsters, and Liber finds the situation rather boring. Yuki finds it strange that even a weak dungeon has no enemies. Suddenly, a strong tremor begins and our protagonist gets scared. A voice in the background desperately shouts for everyone to run as fast as possible. Two adventurers appear, fleeing from a giant slime that is the dungeon boss. Our boy is shocked by the size of the creature that appeared out of nowhere. Liber explains that the monsters practiced cannibalism among themselves due to a lack of humans, and because of this, only the slime survived and grew abnormally. Yuki then shouts for the two adventurers to come closer so they can escape. The giant slime chases the two of them, giving them no chance to escape. The girl ends up being caught and says she can no longer escape. Her foot gets stuck in the ground, and she screams in pain because of the creature's attack. The monster then swallows her whole, and our hero watches, completely shocked. The adventurer is completely submerged inside the body of the slime. Yuki asks Liber if he can save her, but the villain says it's impossible. Our protagonist understands that there is nothing he can do in this situation. The girl remains trapped, fighting to escape certain death. Suddenly, our hero has an idea and decides to act to save her. He runs and dives straight into the giant goo's body without hesitation. The boy jumps into the water to rescue the adventurer in danger. Liber and his servant watch the scene, and the villain lets out a satisfied laugh. He says our boy is impressive for risking his life for others. Yuki reaches the girl and holds her in her arms to protect her. Liber then comments that our hero is the kind of person who saves everyone. Our protagonist then decides that the right time has come. He activates the power of the mark on his hand and summons the Demon King. The villain appears and says he will let himself be used by his new master. Liber then begins to transfer his power to our boy. The process is painful, and Yuki feels as if she is burning from the inside out. He says the sensation is terrible, and the Demon King tells him not to faint. The villain complains that, using only one finger, the power is too weak. Even so, he claims that, for an enemy of that level, It is more than enough. Liver and our hero combine their powers and cast a powerful spell. The magic is called Call of the Chaotic Dawn, and it is very powerful. A massive explosion of purple light and energy fills the entire area. The giant goo is hit directly and begins to dissolve due to the attack. Our boy realizes that the magic wasn't an attack, but something completely different. The rescued girl looks at the lumpy goo and says it was terrifying. She then turns to our hero and calls him a walking disaster. The other adventurer becomes worried when he sees the state our boy is in. He says that Yuki is seriously injured and that they need to take him outside. Our protagonist is confused and tries to say that he is fine, but he is so exhausted that he can't even stand up straight. The last thing he sees is the two adventurers looking at him with concern. Our hero then faints and falls to the ground, powerless. The scene then cuts to a few days later in the Demon King's dungeon. Yuki discovers that his rank has risen to E. While he is in the hospital, he feels grateful because the two adventurers saved him and documented the event. The Demon King then appears and serves our boy a glass of wine. He says it's a toast to celebrate their first victory. Yuki thinks that's an exaggeration, since he only managed to summon the villain for a second. But he corrects himself and says that he didn't even invoke him. He only called him. Liber praises him for not abandoning the girl's life when she was in danger. He goes downstairs and says that Yuki chose a different option. The villain then reveals that he liked the strength demonstrated by our protagonist. Our hero accepts the praise and thanks his new master and partner. Liver then says that next time, he should call upon her for help. A maid then appears before our hero and calls him master. Her name is Elvina, and she is an undead being who serves the Demon King. Yuki returns the greeting and thinks that she seems to be the calm and balanced type, but Elvina says that falling in love with her at first sight would be a problem, because, like an undead creature, she has no pulse and cannot fall in love. The sudden change in personality leaves our protagonist very confused. He asks Liber if she will be all right, and the villain says that she is strong. Elvina then strikes a pose and says she wants to be a more approachable maid. Liber leads them to a fiery dungeon and tells our hero to level up. Several fire monsters emerge from the ground, ready for combat. Without wasting any time, Elvina steps forward and delivers a powerful punch to them. She defeats them all and informs her master that the threat has been successfully eliminated. Elvina then boasts of being a very capable and efficient maid. Yuki smiles because she remembers a child from the orphanage who acted exactly like her. A flashback shows a little girl asking for the attention of colder brother Yuki. The nostalgia is strong, but something interrupts our boy's thoughts. He is bombarded with level up notifications and complains about all the noise. Elvina finds it strange that he's complaining about leveling up and makes another one of her jokes. Elsewhere, Yuki comments that she can keep Elvina summoned for longer. The maid explains that Liber is very powerful and therefore consumes a lot of mana. She says that, regardless of the occasion, you should always knock on the door before entering a place. In the center of the room, a knight in magnificent armor stands, ready for battle. The maid then apologizes for the intrusion and advances to attack the enemy without hesitation. With a leap, she says that the dungeon master will become their sacrifice right there. The knight then raises his flaming sword, preparing to deliver a powerful blow. But our protagonist notices something strange and draws his sword, shouting for her to wait. He realizes that the flames on that sword are very different from any they have seen so far. With that, the young man throws his sword to intercept the blow and shouts Elvina's name. The enemy's blade is deflected at the last instant, and the maid narrowly escapes the attack. The sound of metal clashing echoes through the room, and the girl watches in surprise, not understanding what happened. Yuki pulls her to a safe place, and the servant says that this was to be expected from her mistress. The undead then asks when he realized that those were flames of sacred attribute. The boy replies that he just thought they looked different from the other flames in the dungeon. Furthermore, he says that they resembled the light that his friend Saki usually uses in battle. The girl explains that those flames are the natural enemy of all undead beings. She makes a joke about her heart stopping, and the young man complains that it's not the time for jokes. The knight's helmet shines brightly, and the protagonist says they need to escape. The boss then plunges his sword into the ground to activate one of his most powerful abilities. A large circle of fire surrounds them, and the technique is called Sanctuary of the Circle of Fire. The servant says he is a dungeon warden, and it seems he won't let them escape so easily. Yuki considers summoning Liber, but the maid says that, with his current power, she is the only option with this. The boy concludes that they have no other choice but to deal with it alone. The maid says he has a sharp sense of humor and asks if a tamer will fight in front of her. The young man confirms, saying yes, because, after all, they are battle partners. With a smile, the girl agrees with him and says that he is right about them forming a duo. She then tells them to fight together and prepares for combat with clenched fists. The protagonist also prepares himself and says he will show her the results of his level improvements. The undead then turns to the enemy with a serious look and says that she will act if necessary. The boy then says that he remembers something important that could help in the battle against the Fire Knight. He remembers that upon leveling up, he gained a new skill that could be useful now. With that, he activates his new technique called Demonic Eye of Truth, and his eye begins to glow. Your new ability then analyzes the dungeon boss, revealing its attributes and main technique. The waitress asks if there is anything wrong, and the technician also shows her information and a danger warning. The knight advances to attack, and the protagonist shouts for his partner to quickly dodge the blow. The young man then pushes the girl aside, managing to save her from the enemy's explosion of flames. He holds her tightly to protect her from the impact, and the undead servant looks at him, completely surprised. The boy explains that he can now see the attributes and abilities of the monsters, and even the level of danger they face. With his eyes gleaming intensely, he is able to analyze any opponent he encounters. The girl says that this is a basic skill for a tamer, and thanks him for saving her from danger. But the hero warns that it's still too early to say that the technique reveals everything, and the enemy attacks again. The maid dodges the blow and says that, with the help of her new skill, things will change. Now aware of the dangers, she can finally advance against the knight without fear of being hit. With a confident smile, she says that she can now go on the attack with much more peace of mind. She then delivers a powerful punch right to the enemy's armored chest, but it seems to have no effect. The protagonist is shocked by the result of the last attack and covers his mouth with his hand. He then warns his partner that it's useless because her attacks aren't causing any damage. Using his ability again, the boy says he saw something and that it is actually a fire monster. The maid is confused by the new information and asks what he means by it. The boy explains that the enemy is a fire monster hidden inside the large suit of armor. He continues, saying that the creature moves to avoid attacks, which is why the blows are not hitting the target. With this, the protagonist realizes that, if he concentrates, he will be able to see the informational text moving along with the monster. The maid then says that the strategy is set and asks her boss not to be distracted by it. The chief then prepares to attack again with his flaming sword and great strength. Realizing the danger, the hero yells for his partner to jump to the right, and she dodges the blow in time. He continues giving precise orders to the servant, who manages to dodge all of the knight's attacks. With a leap, the girl manages to escape another attack that was coming from below at high speed. Using his ability, the young man reveals the monster's location, saying it's on his right shoulder. Following the order, the maid delivers a powerful kick right to the enemy's head, who was covered in armor. The knight seems to feel the impact of the blow and reacts for the first time to the girl's attack, but he counterattacks forcefully, and the protagonist yells for his partner to retreat and run away. The servant remarks that it was the first time the master had shown any reaction, but the boy says he only dodged him. The young man is at his limit and says he's almost at the end, while trying to stay focused on the battle. With his eye burning, he struggles to continue using his newfound analytical skill. Upon seeing an explosion, the hero grabs his partner and shields her with his own body, and she becomes worried about him. The boy then apologizes for risking his life in that way to save her from danger. The maid then says that her boss needs to use the special skill she possesses. The protagonist is confused by the request and asks what kind of technique she wants him to use. Next, a screen displays the Madden of All Nature skill, which increases all attributes for a set period. The servant explains that, as a tamer, he can force the activation of the monster's abilities under his contract. She continues saying that, as seen, this technique will only increase her attributes for a moment. The boy understands that he can take him down before he dodges, but since it's a one-time use move, timing is crucial. With a smile, the girl says she is sure her master will use the skill at the right time. The protagonist then agrees and says that they will resolve this in the next attack. With determination, the knight then begins to attack with various bursts of light, and warnings of danger appear everywhere. The hero yells for his partner to dodge the continuous attacks, and the girl prepares to dodge. He then gives the order for her to stop immediately, and the servant instantly obeys her master's command. The young man continues yelling for her to slide to the left, and the girl dodges another blow. Suddenly, a burst of light is directed at our hero, who is unable to react in time. The boy ends up being grazed by the bullet and screams in pain, while the maid watches from a distance. Even wounded, he gets up and tells her not to worry about him, and to focus only on the battle. He then yells for his partner to jump to the left, and the servant dodges another attack from the boss. With that, the boy finally activates the ability, and the mark on his hand glows intensely with power. With her enhanced attributes, the girl leaps into the air and delivers a powerful kick right to the enemy's head. The blow is so powerful that it creates a large crater in the ground and defeats the knight once and for all. With the dungeon warden defeated, the maid observes the result of her attack with a serious expression. Lying on the ground, the protagonist says with a relieved smile that they finally managed to win. The servant comments that using this skill is very tiring. As the boy remains on the ground, she then bids farewell to her master and disappears in a pink light with an elegant bow. With her eyes closed, the maid bids farewell and disappears in an elegant pink glow. The protagonist then yells for her to wait, because he can't even get up from the floor. He tries to summon her again, but the mark on his hands shows no reaction. Suddenly, a mysterious voice echoes through the dark corridor of the now empty dungeon. It was Lieber who said that the boy finally managed to return to the dungeon after the mission. With a serious look, the monster says, "It's good to see the young man return safely." The hero asks where Elvina is, and says he needs to talk to her because she left him behind. The villain then guides him down a corridor that leads to a bright, beautiful, and well-lit place. Lieber says it was good that he came back, otherwise he wouldn't have been able to see her in that special way. The protagonist then sees the maid lying on a bed of flowers and is completely shocked. The enemy explains that this is his way of mourning those who died in this manner. Shocked, the boy asks if the servant has already left and questions why that happened. The monster reveals that its ability has a powerful effect in exchange for the destruction of its body. The skills screen reappears to better explain its mechanics to the boy. With this, the young man finally understands that the usage limit meant it was a one-time sacrifice. With his head bowed, the hero laments and realizes that the girl paid for the victory with her own life. He then shouts that he did not give that order, and that he only wanted to defeat the enemy in the dungeon, nothing more. But the villain tells him to shut up and says that her sacrifice was to save their dungeon. With tears in his eyes, the protagonist understands that, for them, that sacrifice was worthwhile in the end. The monster adds that she simply did the best job possible for that purpose. Lieber says that the responsibility is his, since he is the king of magic and the leader of that place. But the protagonist blames himself, saying that he is the one truly responsible for everything that happened. With tears in his eyes, the boy thinks that he should have reflected more on the matter, and not just followed her suggestion. He remembers that he couldn't fight to the end, and that it's his fault for being so weak. Crying, he blames himself once more for being weak and not being able to protect her until the end. With this, the monster promises that it will make you stronger until you can summon it into battle. The young man then stands up and asks if there is any gentler skill that could revive the maid. The villain replies that no, because the tamers only use and consume monsters, they don't fix them. A tear rolls down the hero's face, leaving him completely devastated by the terrible news. Suddenly, a new servant appears and tells Liber that it's not right to be so wicked. The newcomer's name is Mai, and she says that everyone should have already reached a conclusion on the matter. But she adds that the boy was not included in the discussion, so it wasn't really everyone. The protagonist then uses his ability and realizes that she is one of the Demon King's executives. Your analysis reveals that she possesses sacred magic and a resurrection ability under certain conditions. With that, our hero is completely shocked by the discovery and what it could mean. The new maid then asks with a smile if he wants to know how to resurrect his dead friend. With eyes full of hope, the young man asks if his partner can truly return to life. He points to May and shouts that with her ability, Elvina can finally be resurrected. The girl winks and says that, since he saw her skill, there's no need to explain how it works. But the boy says he can only see the effect, and that conditions exist for resurrection. The monster says that if the ability was recently awakened, this is what it can see, and asks May to explain. With that, the girl formally introduces herself, saying that she is the head housekeeper, named Me. She continues, saying that she takes care of everyone in the dungeon, being the support and resurrection of the group. The protagonist then repeats the words, support, and resurrection, completely focused on it. The servant asks if the human is there to kill them as they did with the dragon in the image. She reveals that it is a guarantee against the worst possible scenario, and that she resurrects those who die, so that the dungeon does not end. Our hero then gets excited, but the girl reminds him that he himself saw that conditions exist. First, she explains that the ability uses a huge amount of mana, making it very inefficient. The maid gives the example that if she were to kill him and then resurrect him, the cost would be enormous. She adds that, in order to revive a human, she would need enough mana to create a dungeon floor. With that, the boy reflects and wonders what the price would be to bring Elvina back to life. The servant replies with a serious look that their dungeon would become significantly smaller. The protagonist believes that if the dungeon shrinks, it will be much easier for others to conquer it. The servant confirms, saying that this is why one of her companions was against the idea of using her own mana. With that, the boy has an idea and asks if they couldn't simply collect the unused mana over time. Mai explains that the second condition is that the person's mana needs to be present in the location for the resurrection to occur. She adds that Elvina's mana will disappear in 10 days, so they need more energy from somewhere else. With a smile, the girl confirms that yes, and our hero still doesn't understand her plan to resolve the situation. The maid then reveals that she was thinking of having the humans themselves help with this task. With a smile, she adds that humans would have to clear a much larger dungeon to obtain the mana. The boy finally understands that if they steal mana from other dungeons, the resurrection can be performed without problems. Leber then says that this is one of the objectives, but the dungeons they have already cleared are not enough. Yuki wonders how much mana is needed, and the servant says she knows nothing about the ranks of human adventurers. She reveals that she suggested they conquer a large dungeon, but all the other monsters were annoyed by the idea. The villain says he cannot expose the plan that Elvina protected with her own life to mortal danger once again. With a clenched fist, our hero volunteers to undertake the dangerous and difficult mission alone. The monster says that this is reckless and that, without a plan, the boy would end up like his former battle partner. The young man agrees, but says that if this is the only way to save her, he needs to try, even if it is risky. With a determined look, he states that he simply cannot choose any other path to follow now. The boy then fronts the villain and reminds him of the contract they made at the beginning of this whole journey. With a tear in his eye, Liber agrees, but it seems he has something more to say to the young hero. A drop of blood falls on the grass, and the villain says that, in that case, he will do whatever it takes to help. With that, the Demon King summons one of his minions and orders him to train our protagonist. Yuki then recognizes the man in the suit and remembers that she fought against Saki at the beginning of the adventure. The servant calls him Wind and says that, with the boy's current strength, many sacrifices will be unavoidable. With a serious and worried look, the monster Liber simply nods and says that he understands. He then entrusts the young man to his servant for the next 7 days, and the steward accepts the order immediately. Without wasting any time, the new coach turns around and tells our hero to follow him to training. The boy then agrees and runs after him while Liber and Mai watch the two walk away. The maid says she is relieved that Viento is strong, but the Demon King tells her to go with them. He then reflects that the butler was completely against using a human until the very last second. Because of this, Liber fears that his subordinate might overact and end up taking the boy's life in the process. The maid is surprised by her master's unexpected order, but seems to understand his concern. Meanwhile, Viento and our protagonist are teleported to another location by a magic circle. The young man observes everything with a focused and attentive gaze, preparing himself for what might happen next. Upon arriving at a castle, he is amazed and wonders if it is really the inside of a dungeon. The butler explains that this is a fraction of Liber's power, and each executive has a floor to use. He adds that the boy is the first human being to see their land, and that this is an honor. The hero then thinks that resurrection must be a last resort, given the need for so many floors. With that, he asks what the training entails, and if Viento will simply help him level up. The trainer explains that leveling up is the act of absorbing mana from monsters and mixing it into one's own body. The protagonist understands that the adventurers cause damage to the dungeon simply by fighting and stealing its mana. The butler explains that the contract with Liber prevents him from leveling up because he already shares the dungeon's mana. The young man understands why he was sent to other dungeons and asks how Viento intends to train him then. Suddenly, a sword flies towards him, and the protagonist catches it in mid-air, completely surprised by the action. With the new weapon in hand, he thinks that the training serves only to improve his combat equipment, but Viento says there is much to teach, for the boy has not built anything useful for himself up to this point. He adds that the young man lacks strength, knowledge, and talent, and therefore has nothing going for him. Startled, our hero shouts and asks why the butler is doing all this so suddenly. The coach explains that if he wants to save Elvina, he needs to develop the strength and skills he lacks. Enveloped in an aura of power, Viento says that the boy needs to build absolutely everything to become strong. The protagonist defends himself from a blow and thinks he won't have time to think if he stops, because the enemy is too fast. The butler then says that if he can't even keep up with his movements, he can't entrust his fate to him. With this, Yuki realizes that his opponent's intention is to fight seriously, without holding back. Viento then announces that he himself will make the judgment to decide whether the boy is worthy of continuing the plan. He adds that his decision will be for the good of the dungeon, and especially for Lord Liber. The young man then understands that, for the butler, it wouldn't make the slightest difference if he ended up dying right there. The challenge is set, and now the hero must survive for 3 hours to master his new sword. With that, the training begins, and the two face off in a fierce and very intense sword battle. With a determined look, the protagonist shouts that he will return to life with the will to perish, if necessary. Suddenly, a screen of skill appears in his eye, which begins to glow with a powerful golden light. With that, he activates his magic eye of truth to analyze the enemy while Viento prepares an attack. His skill then analyzes Viento and reveals his technique, the blood flower bladey. Our hero then realizes that any mistake could be fatal due to the enormous difference in skill level between them. Therefore, he decides that if he cannot defend himself, he needs to move to a point where he cannot see the danger. But Viento teases him, asking if that's the only skill our boy knows how to use. Next, the butler attacks with his enormous sword, putting a lot of pressure on our protagonist. Viento continues his attack with a kick and criticizes our boy's slow judgment. The butler then says that if he only thinks about his next move after being blocked, he's asking to be eliminated. The fight continues intensely, and our protagonist can barely defend himself from his trainer's blows. Our boy is sweating bullets, because the power difference between them is simply absurd. But then, suddenly, he seems to have an idea, and decides that next time he will do something different. With that, he launches his attack, and his sword glows with a new bluish energy. However, Viento effortlessly blocks the blow and says that forcing the attack will not change anything. In the blink of an eye, the butler moves like lightning and attacks our hero from above. The blow is so quick that we only see our boy's blood splattering on the castle floor. Viento observes him with a serious look, seemingly analyzing the state of the battle between them. Even wounded, Yuki gets up, and the butler admits that his movements have improved somewhat. With a gleam in his eye, he said that he saw the movements of the sword and the way to defend himself. He then understands that his eye doesn't just see statistics, but comprehends how a monster moves. Viento notices the fallen sword and realizes that the boy is not just looking at him, but, with a serious expression, the butler says that, even with this new understanding, it is still not enough. Viento attacks and says that, first of all, their physiques are very different. Furthermore, he says that his sword skills are no match for theirs either. Our hero is shocked and realizes that Viento was holding back. The butler adds that their experiences are also very different. With her body covered in bruises, the danger signs only increase for Yuki. He then understands that Viento didn't even use magic, it was just pure swordsmanship. Even so, our boy believes he can still catch up with him in the fight. Viento questions whether this unwavering spirit might not simply be recklessness. With that, the butler decides it's time to test the young man's courage. Then he activates one of his abilities with a red aura of power. Our hero's eyes fill with warnings, and he can't see anything. He thinks that if he doesn't identify the danger, he'll end up being eliminated right there. Therefore, our boy decides to change the way he looks at the situation. He focuses his gaze to find information that could save his life. With this, your skill reveals the details of the enemy's technique. The butler seems surprised to see the blood flower blade exposed. Now that he understands the attack, our hero prepares to counterattack. But the force of the blow is so great that it destroys everything around it. Viento then observes the result of his attack with a serious look, and on the ground, we see our protagonist completely defeated by the blow. Suddenly, our protagonist wakes up in a very luxurious bed. It was Viento who was watching over him, asking if he had finally woken up. The butler then gets up and tells our boy to follow him. Yuki remembers the last attack and trying to copy the ability. He then realizes he has no injuries, and Viento explains why. The servant Mai healed him before he could die. Viento admits it was a crude imitation, but still impressive. Because of this, he says he became more interested in seeing how far the boy will go. The butler warns that the real training will begin right now. Then, he opens a door very slowly with his gloved hand, and it reveals a room full of monsters of all shapes and sizes. Our protagonist is horrified by the scene before him. Viento says the numbers are high, but that he should simply deal with it. Our boy lets out an awkward laugh, because he never thought he would get used to this. But he prepares for yet another expected death. The scene then cuts, and our hero wonders why he's there now. He is serving tea to a monster with a look of profound boredom on its face. Viento explains that a high-level swordsman does not waste movements. Therefore, he needs to learn how to optimize everything without the slightest distraction, and at the same time, he must learn to use his body and his eyes. With a gleam in his eye, our hero asks if he's talking about that ability. Viento says there are many monsters there and asks Yuki to read each of their wishes. Our protagonist then says that he will first observe him and learn from him. The butler then demonstrates how to serve tea with elegance and perfection. His movements are precise, and not a single drop is wasted. With that, He concludes the demonstration with an impeccable and serious demeanor. Our boy then tries to do the same and picks up a huge stack of plates. But the result is a disaster, and he ends up destroying everything in the process. Seeing the mess, he realizes that simply observing and imitating is not enough. He understands that he needs to adapt the movements to his own style. On the second day, one of the monsters approaches our protagonist. He says that the novice Lord Vint liked our hero for some reason. The monster then concludes that this means our boy is strong. Yuki awkwardly replies that he is in the process of getting even stronger. With that, the monster decides to train him and sets off to attack. Our hero then says that he will compensate for his lack of stamina with his eye. He prepares to dodge the blow using his analytical skills. With this, he observes the movements of Vint and the other monsters, and he manages to stop the enemy's punch with the palm of his hand. Training continues, and our hero seems to be making good progress. On the fourth day of training, he encounters a very strange lizard monster. Your analysis shows that the creature is under the effect of freezing. To deal with so many monsters, he needs to analyze, predict, and move. With this, he offers something warm to the lizard, which seems to like it. Our boy then realizes that the monsters there are quite diverse. He then begins to understand the reason for this type of training. Viento chose this for him, so that he would learn to deal with any situation. On the sixth day, a cute and hungry bat appears before our hero. Our protagonist then only needs to foresee and act in order to serve. But the little creature attacks by surprise and bites our boy's neck. It was discovered that his ability is vampirism, and he can drink blood. By the seventh day, he is now able to serve the tea with greater perfection. Your movements are now more precise and without waste. With a smile, he asks Viento what he thought of the result. The butler says the taste and words weren't good, but the demeanor was. For 7 days, the cycle was battle, tea party, and more battle. With a sigh of relief, our hero says he arrived just in time. He then thinks that the training finally ended at the last moment, but Viento looks at him seriously and says that the end only begins now. With that, the butler activates his powerful ability, the Blood Flower Blade. Our hero then recognizes the skill his trainer is about to use. Viento says he can already use his eye, and that he has already imitated the technique. The butler advises him not only to imitate, but to truly make it his own, because if he fails to do that, he will surely perish in the end. But Yuki says he doesn't need to be warned, because he already knows what's going to happen. With a gleam in his eye, he prepares to analyze the enemy's technique. Your analysis is now much more detailed than the first time. With that, our hero prepares for the final test with his sword. He also knows how to use his own body and cuts off his own hand. Using his blood, he activates his version of the Blood Flower Blade. The two then face off in a clash of blades and immense strength. Yuki manages to stop Viento's attack with her sword and great strength, but the butler kicks him out, and our boy is left confused. Viento then looks at him with pity and says that he was one step away from success. Lying on the ground, the boy thinks that he still hasn't managed to save Elvina. He then gets angry and yells at Viento so that he doesn't decide his boundaries on his own. With that, he touches the pool of blood that has formed on the floor of the room, and he uses his ability to create a new version of the butler's ability. Viento is shocked to see that his technique has been completely redesigned. Our hero then asks if he thinks he would give up just because he failed. With that, our hero shouts that now it's a battle of numbers. He then launches his attack with all the strength he has left in his body. His sword clashes with Viento's, and he asks what Viento was thinking. But the butler stops the blade with his hand and praises him for the blow. Our boy is exhausted and asks what he thought of his power. Viento then says that he cannot use this technique multiple times. Yuki then admits that she has reached her limit and can no longer fight. Seeing his condition, the butler supports him so that he does not fall to the ground. He says there is still much to teach, and Yuki's phone rings on the floor. The message on the screen is from Saki, saying that she found the dungeon he asked for. Elsewhere, the girl wonders if her friend will be okay. Even though it's a joint operation, She seems very worried. The document she is reading concerns the exploration of a rank B dungeon. The leader of that place is unknown and appears to be very dangerous. Back in the dungeon, our hero informs Liber that he will conquer the place. The Demon King praises him for having gained a little more strength. Viento says his ways are knave, but Yuki feels stronger. But Liber asks how a rank E character can enter a rank B dungeon. Our hero explains that he is going to assist with the investigation as a porter. Liber understands that the plan is to conquer the place when an opening is found. Liber then asks with whom he intends to make a contract for the mission. Our hero thinks for a moment, and his choice surprises everyone. Even Viento is shocked by our protagonist's decision. Maid Mai also cannot hide her surprise at the choice. Liber then asks if our boy is serious about this. The scene then cuts to the Adventurers Guild, and Saki finds him. The girl waves to him with a very happy and excited smile on her face. She then notices that he is now using a sword and is quite surprised. Our heroine apologizes for the favor, but she says it's no problem. Saki then winks at him and says it helps to have someone she knows around. Suddenly, an adventurer appears and calls out to her very loudly. He and his friends seem eager to conquer the dungeon quickly. Yuki asks if they are members of the group, but Saki immediately denies it. She explains that they are volunteers who accepted a request from the guild. Their goal is to level up by completing missions with an S rank adventurer. The group leader then assumes that Yuki is a rank of fighter since she's with her. Saki asks what his rank is, and our hero confirms that he is still an E. The adventurer is shocked and furious when he discovers the truth. The group then states that a rank E would be a burden and that she should replace them, but Saki ignores them and reminds them that Yuki conquered 2 dungeons on his own. Our hero then thinks that, technically, he wasn't really alone. The other adventurers say that rank E adventurers only do deliveries or investigations. The leader then complains that he wanted to take advantage of Saki's fame to reach rank A. He adds that, with a lone conqueror, it will be difficult to be evaluated. Saki then gets annoyed and says that their mission is to investigate, not to conquer. With that resolved, she begins to explain the target of the investigation. The group then enters the rank B dungeon, the Sealed Cave of Wishes. Saki explains that a dungeon's ranking is determined by the boss's level. Yuki then asks how they know the enemy's threat level. The answer to that is the complexity of the dungeon itself. There are 2 basic rules: the stronger the boss, the more complex he is. And the more tricks the boss has to protect himself, the harder it gets. Saki summarizes that the classification is defined by the area and the number of floors. This dungeon has 2 floors, therefore it is considered rank B, but she reveals that, no matter where they look, the boss is nowhere to be found. Because she was so difficult to find, the request for investigation ended up reaching her. Suddenly, a giant worm-like monster attacks the group. The leader of the other group shouts that the prey is his and launches an attack. With his axe, he delivers a powerful blow and defeats the creature. He then boasts to Saki, who gets annoyed by his attitude. The leader of the other group then turns around and calls our ranky hero. He tells Yuki not to do anything and states that he doesn't care about his title. Suddenly, the sound of breaking stones catches everyone's attention. The adventurer then turns around with an expression of astonishment. Unexpectedly, a giant stone golem appears behind the group. In fact, it wasn't just one, but an army of stone golems. With that, Saki and our protagonist prepare for combat. The girl steps forward, and her sword glows with a blue energy. She then uses her most powerful ability again, the Luminous Slash. Gaido is shocked because he didn't even see the attack. It was too fast. Saki then says that she doesn't need them as a fighting force, only for investigation. Yuki apologizes and says she cut the golem so it wouldn't get in her way. We then see that one of the golems has been cut into perfect cubes. Saki is surprised and asks if he synchronized his attack with hers. Our heroine confirms this and says, it seemed like she was going through a difficult time. The girl is impressed, as she did not expect him to have so much power. She then praises him, saying that he did very well, and thanks him for his help. Our boy comments that the dungeons are absurd, with monsters on the walls. Saki then tells the others to focus on the investigation and leave the fighting to her. Gaido gets annoyed because he needs to find the boss's office to be evaluated. Even after 10 hours of exploration and many struggles, the group analyzes the map but cannot find any clues. Lying on the floor, exhausted, they realize there is no sign of the boss's office. Saki then starts pacing back and forth, trying to think of a solution. She says there's nowhere to go to the next floor and that she's already checked everything. Suddenly, our hero touches the wall and asks what's on the other side. Gaido then mocks him for not knowing the basics of how dungeons work. He explains that the dungeons are alternate dimensions made of mana, that the adventurer approaches menacingly to tell you some hard truths. He says that if you dig into the wall, you'll only hurt yourself with the mana layer. But, with a shining eye, our hero says that doesn't seem to be the case. Gaido is confused by the answer and doesn't understand what he means. Yuki then reveals that the wall and the entire cave are made of something else. With his skill, he demonstrates that everything is made of the same material as the golem. Saki receives the message and uses her luminous slash to destroy the wall. A huge explosion occurs and a hole opens up in front of the group. The girl then yells for everyone to get into the hole she just created. The group then moves on to the new passage that appeared out of nowhere. Our hero observes the scene with a serious and very determined look. And on the other side, they find a huge cave with glowing eyes. Gaido is completely terrified and asks what creature that was. Saki then realizes that they were not inside a dungeon, but inside a giant golem that was pretending to be a dungeon. Gaido is confused and asks the reason for this. The girl replies that it was to deceive about the dungeon's classification. Our hero then concludes that this was the true first floor. The place is so big that it feels like they're outdoors. With this, Saki states that the dungeon is at least rank A, and in fact it's almost becoming an S rank dungeon. The girl picks up her cell phone and announces that this is not the Cave of Wishes, but a super large rank a dungeon that wasn't on the map, and the first floor, resembling a desert, contains only disguised golems. Yuki and Saki then observe the landscape with a serious and focused gaze. In the distance, they can see a huge floating castle in the sky. Gaido asks why the giant golem is no longer moving. Saki explains that he failed in his duty and was deactivated to conserve mana. Its function was to prevent a conquest by a rank S unit like itself. The girl says they are smart enough to think of that. She then reveals that the dungeons are the front line against humans. Our hero remembers Liber and confirms that monsters have emotions. Saki says this is a blessing because they found the dungeon before it could evolve. With this, she declares that the investigation is over and the conquest will begin. The girl tells Gaido and his group to go back and inform the guild about everything, but Gaido refuses, and our hero also says that he will stay and fight. Saki then asks if he's sure he wants to go with her. The reflection in our protagonist's eyes shows all his determination. He asks if she's sure, and Saki says she needs someone to bring information. With a smile, she points to him and says that he is the best choice for this. Suddenly, the girl grabs him by the collar of his shirt and stares at him seriously. She says that this time, they will both return home together and alive. Our hero agrees and thinks he won't let anyone he loves die again. The mark on his hand glows, and he remembers the orphanage and Elvina. Saki then grabs it and activates one of her light abilities. With the luminous formula, she crosses the desert at high speed. Gaido lags behind and complains that he can't see anything because of all the dust. Then he clenches his fists and says he's not going home empty-handed. On the ground, he finds a strange stone that appears to be some kind of ore. Saki continues to move forward and claims they are taking the shortest route. The two then arrive at a place with an absurd density of mana, and there they find a mysterious figure seated on a golden throne. The mysterious figure then reveals herself as the dungeon's leader, a woman made of crystals. She introduces herself as Carrot, the jewel golem, and says that her goal is to become a demon lord. Saki quickly realizes that the enemy was secretly accumulating mana for this. The villain confirms this and says she has been gradually polishing her beauty to reach this point. Without wasting any time, she creates a crystal sword and activates her critical cutter skill. Karat advances directly towards our hero and says that he will enchant him with his power. But our boy activates his demon eye ability to analyze the situation. With that, he and Saki easily dodge the blows, and the villain is surprised by the result. Yuki realizes that the attack is very fast, and that it would be fatal if one of them were hit. However, he compares it to Viento and says it's not scary, blocking her attack. The villain laughs and says it's useless because her body is much more resistant than the golems. Our protagonist agrees and, with sword in hand, says that he only needs one thing. With a serious look, he states that he will only create an opening for his partner. Seizing the opportunity, Saki uses her powerful luminous slash ability to attack. The blow strikes Karat's sword, cracking it, and leaving the villain shocked at having been scratched. The girl then comments that her body is hard, but not unbreakable. Observing from afar, our hero thinks that rank S abilities are truly absurd. The dungeon warden says the attack hurt, but she doesn't seem to have lost her composure. Saki realizes something is wrong, as her enemy still seems very calm. Yuki then warns her not to let her guard down, and she agrees, ready for whatever comes. Saki says she's going to feed her with a combo and goes into battle, but the boss says she perceived their weakness with a very confident smile. With her skill, she creates a giant crystal spear with immense power. Our heroine realizes she used a lot of mana, but nothing happened. Suddenly, Saki is shocked by something she sees right behind them. The giant golem has regenerated and is now blocking the exit. The chief then says, if they don't save their friends, they will all perish. Saki realizes that the villain was collecting material from the other golems. She understands that if she wastes time there, the other adventurers will be eliminated. Our protagonist then tells his friend to go save Gato and his group. He says he can't leave that creature unsupervised there. With his sword in hand, our hero says that he will stop her alone. Saki then smiles and says that she is leaving everything in our boy's hands. She promises they'll have a party when they get back to the guild. The boss then mocks him and calls him sacrificial pawn for having stayed there. But our hero replies that it is not a matter of sacrifice, but of mutual trust. He remembers everyone who trusted him, Saki, Liber, and even Viento, and because of that, he feels he is there to honor that trust. Our protagonist then lights his lighter and prepares to fight. The boss is surprised and asks how he has the power of a monster. He then says that from that moment on, he will fight as a tamer. With that, our hero steps forward and says that the technique he uses is that of a monster. The chief is shocked and asks how he managed to cut her with the sword. With his keen eye for truth, he says that he perceived her technique and copied it. The boss then says she will rework her technique into a new version. With a new look, she says that now she will unsnare him and finish him off. But our hero challenges her, saying that her blade will not reach him. The boss accuses him of being full of loopholes, but attacks him anyway. But our boy lets her hit him on purpose as a strategy. The villain is shocked. He wasn't expecting that move from him. Our hero then says that this time, he will use her toughness against her. The boss then realizes that he had been using it since the beginning of the fight. Yuki then wonders if this is what it means to be a true monster tamer. The villainess becomes furious and says she will not forgive him for damaging her shell. Our protagonist says that, naturally, it won't end like this. With that, he steps forward and says he's going to show her what real skill is. The boss then transforms and compresses her crystals to become stronger. She then declares herself the mistress of that dungeon, the powerful Karat. The villainess says she will not include him in her collection of adventurers, and with a hateful look, she vows to turn him into sand. Our hero then steps forward and delivers a powerful blow to his arm. The boss says that, as she thought, she can't use that mass of crystals. Yuki then teases her, saying that her lack of talent is quite obvious, but the villain laughs and says that the jewels are more valuable the bigger they are. Our protagonist replies no, and that something else is important. He says that the most important thing is how you exquisitely cut the jewel. With that, our hero uses his version of the blood flower blade. Blood splatters on his face, but he maintains his complete focus on the battle. The boss is shocked and wonders why a human possesses the same ability. Yuki then reveals that this is not the same skill, but rather her own style. The attack with multiple blood blades hits the boss squarely, but the villain manages to dodge at the last second and narrowly escapes. Even so, his crystal body is completely destroyed by the blow. Our hero is exhausted, but happy to have landed the attack in battle. He realizes that his blood is still heavy and that he needs to train more. Our boy turns around and sees the remains of the boss on the floor of the throne room. Karap then admits that it was a powerful ability to destroy her body, but she says the price was high and moves to attack our hero. Yuki then says that he saw her movements and defends against the blow with his sword. The boss realizes he's reached his limit and punches him in the face. Even wounded, our hero activates his blood ability once more. The boss then questions him about what he can do in that state. A blood stain on his shirt shows the wound caused by the blow. He admits that he can do nothing alone, but activates his summoning. With that, the adorable little bat he trained appears for battle. The little creature then spits out all the blood it had stored. In a flashback, we see Viento and Liber understanding their strategy. He reused the blood that the bat had stored during training, and since the skill requires a lot of blood, the bat doubles your chances. But the problem is that if he misses both shots, his life will be in danger. Therefore, to ensure the second blow, he uses his own blood for the first. Viento then realizes that at that moment, he would be nearing the end. The strategy consisted of inducing the opponent to negligence by exploiting their weakness. Liber then praises him for approaching the kingdom of the strongest vampire. Back in the fight, our hero says he'll make the little guy work a little. Carrot realizes that from the beginning, his plan was a double attack. Our protagonist then says that he will return to the previous introduction. He introduces himself as Yuki, the monster tamer who fights with everything he's got. And with a powerful blow, he uses enemies and allies to win. The boss is then hit squarely, and her crystal body splits in half. With the boss defeated, a bright light fills the entire room. Our hero then claims to be human, even though he has a pact with a demon. He senses the magic of the dungeon, and his eyes begin to burn with power. With the mana gathered, he says that this should be enough for the plan. He then uses his mark and absorbs all the magical energy of that place. With that, he shouts Liber's name, saying that he is counting on his help. Suddenly, Saki appears and catches him before he falls to the ground, exhausted. The girl is shocked and asks if he defeated the boss alone. Yuki says she can't stand up because of anemia and asks for help. The scene then cuts to a press conference with many reporters. A man in a suit thanks everyone for attending the event. He says that a special situation occurred in a dungeon, and that the person involved will report the details directly to them. The photographers are excited and say that this will be the headline of the day. The man then announces the person who contributed the most to cleaning the dungeon. Reporters comment that the fake dungeon alone was big news. With that, Saki, the rank's adventurer known as Innocent Lightning, enters the scene. The reporters get excited and start asking a lot of questions. They question the risk of collapse and intelligent monsters. Saki then asks for silence and begins to summarize the achievement. Saki complains that Yuki always pushes things onto others to do. In a flashback, we see our hero asking her to take care of everything for him. The girl then complains that he hadn't even finished healing her, and he'd already left. With a serious look, she wonders what could be so important. Our protagonist then arrives at Liver's dungeon and inquires about the ritual. Mai says they are finishing the last part of the resurrection. Viento warns him not to look, for the magic could burn his eyes. But our hero says he can feel the immense power, even from a distance. Mai then uses her chains to bring Elvina back to life. The housekeeper says she will not allow her to remain in the afterlife. With her create an order skill, she completes the resurrection ritual. With a soft glow, Elvina finally opens her eyes and comes back to life. Our protagonist runs up to her and calls her by name, very relieved. The servant is confused and wonders why her master is there. She then asks if he has already passed away, and Yuki corrects her in a funny way. Mai says she was shocked, thinking Elvina's trip was in vain. Our hero then takes her hand with a sigh of relief. He says he's happy to see her healthy, and well, after all. Elvina then makes one of her jokes about being an undead. Suddenly, Viento appears and says that the two of them have work to do. Yuki asks if he's going back to work as a butler, and Elvina finds that strange. But Viento says no, and Mai appears with a new suit for him. Our protagonist then puts on the elegant suit and looks very handsome. Viento then says that with that outfit, he's the main star today. The butler opens the door and reveals a room full of different monsters. They all thank our hero for saving them with mana. Our boy is confused and doesn't understand what's happening there. Liber then explains that the dungeon's mana was so abundant that it was enough to revive more monsters. Mai says she revived far more people than planned and is exhausted. Yuki is shocked, and Liber says that everyone was curious to meet him. The monsters then surround him and invite him to drink and tell the story. Elvina pulls him aside and says that she's also confused by how amazing he is. Our hero asks Liber for help, but he doesn't seem to care much. The Demon King then approaches with a goblet of wine in his hand. He says that, thanks to our boy's choice, everyone was saved, and that, as a tamer, he needs to get used to receiving thanks. But our protagonist says he didn't do it for them. He looks at Elvina and says that she reminded him of another girl. Our hero then finds himself surrounded by monsters and his former partner. And finally, an image shows him happy with Saki and the children from the orphanage. With a clenched fist, our hero prepares for what is to come, but he says he's happy that everyone was saved in the end. With a smile, he reflects on everything that has happened up to that moment. Suddenly, one of the monsters shouts that he is Vintit's best disciple. Viento then complains that he needs much more training to become a star. Liber then says that Viento must like him very much to be so worried. The butler replies that the same applies to Liber, who helped him get dressed. Liber then admits that at first he thought they would use him as a pawn, but in the end, he was the one who used them and obtained unexpected results. With a satisfied smile, he says that that boy is very interesting and that it will be the key to conquering the world one day. Back at the press conference, Saki asks a reporter to repeat the question. A mysterious man in dark glasses questions her about Yuki. He wants her to hand over the real hero who cleared the dungeon. The man says she is hiding someone dangerous and very powerful. With a smile, he says he will take this young man for himself. In a dark alley, the mysterious man attacks Gato to obtain information. The message on the fallen phone reveals that he wants to know about the other adventurer. Gato then shouts that the boy accompanied Saki on the mission. The man then dismisses him and complains about low-ranking adventurers. Gato then reveals the name of our protagonist to the mysterious man. The man then finds Yuki's photo on a board of adventurers. Even wounded, Gato begs to be released, as he is not involved. But the man says it would cause problems, and decides to get rid of it. Gato then despairs, and the man tells him to blame his own tongue. With that, a huge explosion of fire consumes the entire dark alley. The scene then cuts to our hero walking through a park. He reflects that it has been a very long time since he was surrounded by humans. Our boy decides to take a break and not think about his monster friends. Holding a bouquet of flowers, he says it's time to visit everyone. He then arrives at a memorial dedicated to the victims of the Great Collapse. A stone monument honors all those who died in that disaster. Our hero then remembers everyone from the orphanage he lost. With a smile, he says he has many things to report to them. Her eyes fill with determination to continue her journey. Suddenly, he realizes someone is there and thinks it's Saki, but in reality, it was the mysterious man who was waiting for him. He introduces himself as Zapper, an A-rank adventurer and colleague. Yuki finds it strange and says he's never seen him before, but Zapper ignores him. The man then reveals that he came all the way there to recruit our protagonist. Zapper says he knows he cleared the fake dungeon by himself. He says that Yuki doesn't need to hide it because he knows he was there. Our hero is shocked and wonders how he found all this out. He remembers asking Saki to say that she was the one who solved the problem. Our protagonist then tries to downplay the situation and says that he only helped with the evacuation, but Zapper challenges him and says that he was the one who defeated the boss, and that the lightning destroyed the golem in a matter of seconds. Yuki then realizes that the man knows too much and that she is in danger. Zapper doesn't understand the reason for so much secrecy, but he advises him. He says that cleaning dungeons isn't a normal job with many workers, but to make real money, you need powerful weapons. And he says that the best weapons are the rarest and most powerful. Yuki then asks if he is referring to himself as a weapon. Zapper says there's a limit to how much you can clear dungeons alone, using only abilities. But in a group, even with smaller rewards, it's possible to go to more places. He then clenches his fist and reveals his ring, gleaming with power. With a hug, Zapper invites him to make money together. Our hero appreciates the consideration, but rejects the offer immediately. He says with a smile that his goal is not to make money from dungeons. Zapper then shrugs and says that, in any case, he's not good with words. Zapper then says that he would try to recruit him by force anyway. With a wicked grin, he activates a magic circle and prepares to attack. Our protagonist is surprised by the adventurer's sudden movement. The man then uses the fire hammer ability and delivers a powerful blow. The bouquet of flowers that Yuki was holding catches fire due to the attack. Our hero gets furious and says that it's forbidden to use magic in the city. Zapper praises his dodging and says he wants him even more now. Yuki shouts that this is a place where people rest in peace. Zapper admits that magic is illegal, but refusing his offer is far worse. With the stone-binding ability, he traps our protagonist on the ground. Yuki is unable to move and realizes she cannot use her abilities. The man says he has no experience fighting other people. Zapper then grabs him by the face, but Yuki uses one of her abilities. With Ice Prison, he manages to break free from the stone chains. The man says they are opposites, and that Yuki was born to explore dungeons. And that's why he wants him in his group, to use his power to his advantage. He threatens him, saying that he will hunt him down in every dungeon he visits. Zapper then reveals that he is the skill assassin, and no one can stop him. Our protagonist grinds his teeth in anger at the man's threat. The villain then says he will wait for a yes. Before he dies, the burnt bouquet of flowers falls to the ground with a dull thud. In his dungeon, Liber realizes that someone is trying to steal his pawn. With a hateful look, he says that the man's attitude is quite rude. Our hero then returns to the dungeon and asks his friends for help. Viento asks why he didn't bring his sword to the city. Yuki explains that, even with that, he would still lose to Zapper's power. Liber then reminds him that he is a monster tamer, and that he can simply use monsters that are good at magic. Suddenly, an elf named Makina Matura appears to help. Liber says that nobody knows more about magic than that elf. With a mischievous smile, he says that she studies the abyss. The elf complains that she doesn't like Viento, but seems interested in the boy. She mentions that she has never seen him at tea parties or other events. Makina then gets annoyed and says she doesn't like being called old-fashioned. She reveals that she is approximately 1,499 years old. Our heroine is shocked by her own age, but still considers herself young. The elf then decides that she will help make Vince's disciple stronger. With a mischievous look, she says that Viento would hate to see his disciple like this. But our boy ignores her and asks her to teach him how to use magic. The elf agrees and says that the development of magic requires stimulation. Our hero arrives at a huge library and asks Makina if all those books are about magic. The elf replies that there are many more and that her entire floor is basically made up of books and more books. She then teases him, saying that, judging by the expression on his face, he doesn't even know what real magic is. With that, the elf points to him and asks the first question, which is the difference between magic and skills. Our protagonist is left speechless and realizes he had never thought of this before. Makina then explains that skills are personal abilities, while magic is a universal ability. Yuki is confused by the term, and the elf explains that the abilities are divided into 3 different types. The first type are skills that come from a profession, like our boys, Demon Eye of Truth. The second type are abilities that each race is born with, such as the vampirism of the Little Bat. And finally, skills that are born when a technique is mastered, like the Viento Blade. The elf explains that everything depends on each individual's skills and body to function. That's why she says that, even though they may seem the same, the essence is completely different. She then asks if he has experience with this, since he tried to copy Viento's technique. Next, an image shows our hero using his own version of the Bloodflower Bladey. Our protagonist says he knows very well what it's like, and that magic is the opposite of that. The elf agrees and says that, with the same magic and power, the result will always be the same. With that, she raises her finger and states that magic is a universal and absolute law. And with a powerful green aura, she says that this is what they call magic. Our hero seems to finally understand and gets excited, but soon another question arises. Makina then prepares for the second question, and he wants to know why some people don't use magic. Yuki then asks if the conditions are difficult, such as consuming a lot of mana, but the elf says the answer is simple. She explains, with a somewhat grumpy expression, that the reason is that magic is very difficult to use. Our boy thinks it's about manipulating magical power, but the elf says it's nothing like that. With that, she throws a book at him and explains that the original magic requires an enormous enchantment. But our hero remembers that Zapper used a very short spell to trap him on the ground. He then says that he has never seen such a long incantation, and that it is usually just a matter of invoking the name of the magic. The elf smiles and asks the third question, wanting to know how he thinks they do it. Our protagonist then pauses for a moment to think of an answer to this new enigma. With this, he concludes that they must be using something else to help. Makina congratulates him and says that the answer is correct, using his team as a good example. Furthermore, she explains that it is also possible to use magic circles to shorten the process, or recite the spell mentally, omitting some parts to make it faster and more practical. The elf says that the best part of magic is that the more you learn, the more you can cheat. As an example, she summons a fire hammer with a very short and simple incantation. She calls this chant commission and says that you complete the image in your mind before conjuring. However, the outcome depends heavily on how you understand the original incantation of the magic. She explains that each person visualizes this differently, whether through text, image, or sound. Our hero then understands why there are differences in power even with the same sound. The elf says that once you understand this, you can create anything you want with your own magic. With this, she demonstrates her power and summons a firehammer far stronger than the previous one. Our hero is impressed by the display of such power. Makina explains that this is how he fills the gap between the enchantments. With that, Yuki thinks he understands and asks if he just needs to memorize it. The elf confirms, but warns him that this would limit him forever, because an enchantment is in order, and he could not create new spells. Our boy then complains that it's like learning a new language, and he's already bad at English. Makina says she knows humans have little time left and asks him to be grateful. With this, she uses powerful magic to create a living library. Our protagonist is then surprised and a little scared by this. Suddenly, he finds himself in a place full of fire, without understanding anything. The elf then explains that the spell made him experience the book. She reveals that if he completes the virtual dungeon, he will learn the content. Yuki then receives a sword so she can fight in that place. With the weapon in hand, he feels more confident and says he's better at it. But suddenly, his eyes widen at what he sees ahead. The elf says he will read all the basic attributes and transformations. 2 giant fire serpents appear, and he wonders if he will be able to eliminate everything. Makina then smiles and asks if he's going to say it's impossible. A fiery enemy then advances to attack our hero with everything he has. With a confident smile, our protagonist replies that it's not impossible. With that, he advances and uses an ice ability to defeat the enemies. Makina observes everything with a smile of great pride and satisfaction. With a gleaming look in his eyes, our hero says he will finish everything in an instant. 3 days pass, and the intense training continues in the dungeon of Liber. A giant eagle screams and attacks our protagonist with everything it has. He then begins to recite an incantation for wind magic, but the creature doesn't give him time to finish and attacks him with its claws. The blow throws him far away, and he screams as he falls from a great height. With that, our hero summons a hand of air to save himself from falling. The elf then mocks him and says that her disciple has no talent whatsoever. Lying on the ground, he understands why adventurers don't chant incantations. Makina explains that magic was never meant for fighting, but rather for deceiving the world. Even so, our hero says he has already learned the spells for all the elements. With that, he prepares to use stone magic to attack. But when he summons the arrow, it falls to the ground without any force. Our protagonist then complains that his power is greatly diminished without the chant. The elf reminds him that shortcuts cause individual differences in magic, and the more he omits the command, the more confusing the spell becomes. She says he's bad at compensating for that with his imagination, and because of that, he realizes he wouldn't be able to defeat Zapper that way. Yuki then realizes that she cannot react in time to Zapper's magic. Makina says she hasn't yet learned all the necessary attributes to fight. She encourages him, saying that he can do well in the next element. Even so, our hero feels he needs to find an attribute that suits him well. But with a serious look, he wonders if Zapper has any weaknesses. Meanwhile, elsewhere, a group of adventurers is camped. Zapper then discovers that Yuki has entered an S-ranked dungeon. His companion confirms this and says it was a location where a group of rank S soldiers had retreated. A flashback then shows just how extremely dangerous the dungeon was. With a smile, Zapper finds our boy's attitude very clever. His partner asks what to do, and Zapper says they'll go inside. The guy tries to warn him that monsters still exist and that he is very dangerous. Zapper then smiles and admits that the dungeon might be dangerous for them. Suddenly, a giant worm attacks the camp by surprise. The adventurers are startled and scream when they see the monster appear. The creature then swallows one of the group members whole. Zapper prepares to fight with a serious and very determined look. He then uses various spells of all elements at the same time. With the floor covered in dead monsters, he complains about the materials. Your partner is shocked to see the song omit all attributes. Zapper's partner is shocked and wonders if that's really the power of an extremely strong first-class rank A mage. Zapper says they need to find Yuki quickly before he gets too strong. His partner points to the bodies, but the villain doesn't seem to care. He says they are replaceable and that he can simply get more if he needs them. The guy is shocked, and Zapper says he doesn't waste magic on weak people. Then, he puts out the cigarette with a very serious and determined look. Meanwhile, back in the dungeon, our hero seems very frustrated. Zapper then says that he only uses his power to capture someone special. Back in the library, Makina notices our boy lying on the hallway floor. She then says that he has no talent whatsoever to be special. Crying, our hero complains that he can't even omit a single chant. Makina thinks that if the primary attributes aren't working, the secondary ones are even worse. Our son apologizes, and she says they'll manage with what they have. The elf then gets annoyed and tells him not to pretend he understands magic. Yuki tries to explain, saying that all her spells failed. She then reminds him that the training hasn't even really begun yet. The elf says that magic is a miracle that allows everyone to rewrite the world, and because of this, she will not tolerate him giving up or making concessions. Our protagonist is confused and asks how he should proceed then. The elf then reminds him that he did something similar to Viento. With that, she tells him to create a new magic that he can actually use. She says that, given his level, he could already be teaching amateurs. Our hero then understands that he needs to create a magic in which he is good. Makina winks at him and says that this is exactly the way to go. She explains that he needs to affect the mana and then apply an enchantment. Our protagonist then reflects on how it is possible to change the world using only feelings. The elf says that, for combat, a practical approach is better and prepares himself. Suddenly, she notices something and uses an aquatic vision spell. The water sphere shows Zapper storming their dungeon with full force. The villain uses a wave of fire and searches everywhere for our hero. With a smile, he says he needs to find Yuki as soon as possible. He then uses a wind, searching spell to find his target. Our protagonist is shocked to see that Zapper found him there. Makina considers this the perfect situation for our boy's training. She then tells him to deal with the situation using magic, not by summoning creatures. Suddenly, a magic circle teleports everyone to a different place. Our hero then remembers the time he was caught in the Demon King's trap. The teleportation causes him to fall to the ground, and he realizes he's on an unfamiliar floor. Zapper is also caught off guard and wonders if that's teleportation magic. Zapper then approaches and says that, as he suspected, our hero was hiding his power. With a mocking smile, he asks what our boy's answer is to his proposal. Our protagonist is furious and seems ready to respond forcefully. Without wasting any time, he launches a powerful ice attack against his opponent. Yuki lands with his sword in hand, ready to continue the battle that had begun. But Zapper says he doesn't need an answer because his rebellious eyes say it all. To defend himself, our hero then uses a magical stone barrier to protect himself. With his sword, he manages to deflect all the ice projectiles that come his way. Zapper is surprised to realize that he also has an aptitude for swordsmanship. Suddenly, a puddle of mud emerges from the ground, ready to attack our boy. The mud then traps Yuki's legs, leaving him in shock and unable to move.